It is the early exchange where we shape policy and advance development with our conversation. Earlier, we talked about the proposed US tax policy. And now to our second big story for today, which is to look at the cash transfer program in Nigeria. As IMF has advised the Nigerian government to ensure that this cash transfer is extended to the rural areas. My question is, as a Nigerian, have you benefited from this cash transfer, which is important for us to talk about this? You can give us your view, you can give us a first-hand information as regards what is happening in your area. If as a Nigerian, you benefited from this, all you just have to do is to go on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, to share your view or give us information, feedback. Perhaps you benefited and you want to tell us the story, the testimony you've heard as regards the cash transfer program. Our social media platforms are open for you to send your messages. And now we want to get back to our guest for today, who is prepared for this conversation for us to look at cash transfer program in Nigeria, as IMF has extended an advisory to the Nigeria government to ensure that this program is extended to the rural areas, giving them priority. We're being joined by Marcel Okeke, who is a financial economist. Glad to have you join us on the next thing this morning.
For having me on this program.
All right, so let's start this conversation by doing a spotlight on that program itself in Nigeria, and I think that's the best way to kick off this conversation. We're talking about cash transfer program in Nigeria. You are a Nigerian, you've been in this country for, let me imagine, for years. What would be your assessment of this program thus far? Would you consider it to be successful? Would you consider it to be unsuccessful? And what are some of the loopholes, some of the observations you've had as regards the cash transfer initiative by the federal government? Talk to us.
Well, let me say thank you for this question. And straight away, I want to tell you that talking about cash transfer as a way of tackling poverty or trying to drive economic development in Nigeria has been a woeful failure over the years. The immediate past administration of Alhaji Muhammadu Buhari tried to do a lot in that regard, and by way of continuity, or maybe dictates of current economic reality, the present administration has also been on, with a lot of social investment and emphasizing, cash transfer. My view is that, like the efforts of its predecessor, they're also failing. They're also failing because if what the figures they push out in terms of trying to parade, the sources they are making or have made are really correct, it would have been seen the impact, where people who have benefited, the well-being is improving and all that. But on the contrary, what we keep seeing really increases in the level of poverty in the land, okay? When in fact cash transfer is supposed to largely, to some extent, handle that. But the poverty level keeps increasing and everybody knows about it. If you, like you were asking, if you move into the hinterland or try to go to rural areas, it is very, very difficult, for you to find somebody that will testify to you as a beneficiary, cash transfer, and be able to tell you how that has improved his or her, state of well-being, in the current economic situation. So at the end of the day, I think the mixture of politics and economics is involved in all these claims, okay? Because once, whether the cash transfer is administered centrally, by the federal government or through the state government and local government, I mean, there's also the political issue and political interests of those various subnationals. And so what is intended to go to some people or group of persons in those places usually end up not getting to the intended, target population, okay? And people pocket them for various reasons. So misappropriation, that's believing that in the first place, some amounts are sent out. So that's been my experience, and that's my view on this. And so it doesn't solve anything, or it doesn't solve the problem that it is supposed to solve. That's my position. That's my opinion. That's my view. And that's my assessment. Thank you.
All right. So now you're giving your assessment of the conditional cash transfer program of the federal government. Now, ideally, this is supposed to help households, about 15 million households in Nigeria, who would receive 75,000 naira over a 3-month period. But from your assessment, it doesn't seem like the intended beneficiaries are getting this. What do you think perhaps are the challenges aside maybe some political issues that you've already highlighted? Could there be other issues with data? And what else could you think is challenging this project?
Well, you know that when you talk about rural areas, do you know that many parts you can regard as rural areas in Nigeria today, whether in the north or in the south, some of them are no longer even accessible because of the level of security or insecurity in those places. So somebody somewhere will be parading those figures, claiming that so billions have been spent or sent, to people residing in those places. We're talking about rural areas, okay? And when you now want to send the money, you may not send an officer from Abuja to go to those remotest, parts of the country. Usually it could go down to people who are at the state level. I am now saying, once he leaves the center and goes to these subnational levels, they may not share the same political ideology with people at the center. You know that it's not the same political party, that is in charge in all the states. And there's the perception that such money are really national cake. They are national cake, and so are treated as such once you get to those levels. So people just open their mouth, whoever gets it, and takes as much as possible, and perhaps ends up sending some crumbs, if it's charitable enough to send some crumbs, to the intended target, assuming anything gets to them at all. That has been the experience over the years, okay? And then there is this issue of transferring money. When you transfer money, it doesn't add anything in terms of production or productivity, in the society, okay? In economics, it's called transferred payment. And when you do transfer payment to people, so you are giving the money to them, not because of any value they have added, not because of their, labor, not because of their contribution, to economic growth. And so at the end of the day, you see it is all money, pushed through the pipeline. I mean, down the drain, if you like. And so looking at it in its totality, it's neither here nor there, because you don't drive economic development, by just, having a feeling to help the poor. You don't run government or economic development like that. It's something that you have to be deliberate and plan. And that's why we always talk about economic plan or economic roadmap. So these seem to be emergencies, and you just bring some chunk of money and start dishing out, and say, give to these people, this, give. At the end of the day, I mean, it's money down the drain. That's still my position. Thank you.
Now, still talking about this program, the intention of the federal government is to transfer, do direct transfer to 75 million Nigerians. And there are Nigerians who have had cause to question the rationale behind those who are going to benefit from this cash transfer. Talking about social register in Nigeria, some have also raised the issue of reliability, the authenticity of these register. Given the fact that what played out in the last regime, and some officials that have been accused recently of the issue of fraud and misappropriation. Now, what do you think will make of this program? And if you are to advise how to improve on this system, you also have it in US and other climes where you have social security network or system. What do you think is fundamentally wrong here in Nigeria as regards this direct transfer? and how that can that be corrected to ensure that these money actually get to people who will need it, those who are actually poor? And how do we determine who is to be in this category, talking about the vulnerable in the society? I would like you to expand on this and give your thoughts.
Thank you very much again. You in your preamble, you said a lot, especially with respect to population and figures. You know, when it comes to who is really poor, okay, it's a controversial issue as to the determination of who is poor, and you know who keep the record, the social data, like you said. You know, from the federal level to state level to local government level to various communities. Nigeria is notorious for not keeping such record over the years, you know, contrary to claims, you know, that some people will make. And so, what are you relying on? Then you see that the figures are conjectures, if you like, by politicians who are really out to see what they can get or gain, you know, from the system. And they are the ones who go around, you know, mounting the whole thing, you know, cash transfer and all that. Because at the end of the day, this issue of transferring money to millions or hundreds of thousands of people and all that, it is people in those locations that we pile up names. In most cases, you find out that those names are either fake, I am now telling you, either fake, compiled by somebody at a desk, or are names of relations of somebody that has the privilege of being the one to compile those names. So he ends up writing the names of people from his hamlet or from his village. You understand? And at the end of the day, the whole money, you know, we claim that money has been sent into the accounts of those persons. When at the end of the day, they have to bring the money back to the guy who, in the first place, entered their names. I don't want to start making some disclosure, but I have had, you know, some experiences in this regard. So somebody will use his position to just either compile fake names, like it's easy to write names, or write the names of his relations and people from his village and hamlet, like I said. And the whole thing at the end of the day, the money will come back to him. Okay? So the person is amassing the money, you know, with a view to the next election. He's going to contest. You understand? So those are the things that work against, you know, this thing. When you say they also take place in developed countries, yes, okay, I'm fine. But the kind of situation we have here, like the issue of even getting the statistics in the first place, you have them done well. You have them done properly in those climes. Unlike our own Nigeria here, see how contentious the issue of population, you know, census is in Nigeria. Do we have any reliable figures, whether as to how many we are as a country, or whether you now come to break it down in terms of number of females or males, or number of people in social states or local government area and communities and so on and so forth? Because the political interests in these things, you know, in which is played out today. You have some states having 40-something local government. You have some having less than 15 or less than 20, and so on and so forth. Okay? And it's contentious as to how the number of local governments are arrived at. You know, because things are shared, whatever economic benefits are shared according to the number of local governments, and so on and so forth. The same through political constituencies and wards and all that. So when they look at all these, you know, these things get messed up because of the political interests, you know, that those who find themselves in position to execute them, these things have their political interests. So they end up, you know, messing up the whole thing. But in the developed world, for instance, the issue of statistics and data, you know, to a large extent, has a lot of credibility because it has been their life, you know, lifestyle over the years. Okay, the institutions for this have been established and have been proven to be largely right and correct. We don't have them in Nigeria. So this is work against, you know, such cash transfer. Yes, there could be good intention. You are saying the same thing that people are saying in the developed countries. But our own procedure here, our own processes are faulty. Okay, so at the end of the day, we end up not achieving what we intend to achieve. That's what I can say for now. Thank you. Thank you.
about school feeding, homegrown school feeding. It's about cash transfer or maybe housing to low-cost housing or some form of empowerment to the youths. What's your assessment of these initiatives? Earlier while speaking, you mentioned that some of these persons are handed cash for doing nothing. Are there more creative ways to have social safety nets for people or for vulnerable citizens?
Thank you. We have to get the first thing right first. And that first thing is, how do we arrive at the data? Because if the data has integrity, if the data has the right credibility, this is be gotten right. Okay? But all of us are familiar with the economic history of this country. We have not gotten it right. Okay? And then you have this political ascendancy, if you like, over economic consideration. So when it comes to taking some decisions, political consideration overrides a lot of things. Okay? So that at the end of the day, since you don't have a reliable or a trusted structure in place to execute these things, the people that are appointed are just politicians. Okay? And when you appoint politicians to be the instrument or channels for executing, these good intentions, they end up behaving as politicians. But in the developed countries, like we were saying, you have professionals who have, over the years, gotten used to the culture of this is how it is done and done properly, and the intended results are achieved. But here in Nigeria, political coloration, political consideration, and the treatment of, political interest over, economic consideration, like I said, is our challenge. Is our challenge. So that any politician that in quote is
if we had core professionals handling this and we had the process right, we have collected data of persons who were vulnerable, having determined who the vulnerable are exactly, what then should be the initiatives to be implemented? Would you still subscribe to cash transfer, homegrown school feeding, maybe some empowerment for the youths and low-cost housing, or there more to be done?
There's more to be done. Talking as an economist, I am not a supporter. I don't subscribe to transfer payment, giving people money, just because they are poor. Okay? It has to be tied to, their creativity, to their labor, to their labor value-adding ability, and to their to encourage their economic initiative. And so that is where small-scale loans, talk about, if you like, call them nano, call them SMEs and all that, come in. So those are the kind of things the government will look into. Find out people who really have ideas, who are really doing something, and encourage them to do something creative, something that will add value to the economy. Because giving people money free, which is what cash transfer really means, is a way of directly or indirectly encouraging them to remain where they are as parasites on the society. You understand? Okay? So perpetually, you are supporting them to remain where they are. Because the cost of living today. If you give somebody all these things we're talking about, 70-something thousand or 100,000, break it down. When you want to buy foodstuff, for example, how much you will deploy to buying food and what will be left in a day, in a week, in a month, and so on and so forth. So you see that is next to nothing, and it turns out useless. But if the money is committed to supporting a business idea or an ongoing business that the person is doing, no matter how small the scale is, chances are that the person is going to develop, is going to improve, and maybe add one or two more hands as people being employed. And on the aggregate in the economy, you see the economy doing better, than hitherto. But this issue of cash transfer, as an economist, I don't subscribe to it. That's my position. That's my position. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Okeke, even if you don't subscribe to these, it's still an intention from the federal government to ensure that this cash transfer is done. Now, let's shape policy further in this regard by looking at what IMF is saying and how that can be achieved. Now, IMF has advised the federal government to redirect it to the rural areas. Now, my question to you, Mr. Okeke, is if the federal government is to extend this cash transfer to the rural areas, looking at the peculiarity of their challenges and their problem and the terrain, what kind of template or approach do you think will get result in these rural areas? These are areas where data could be a problem. But will you subscribe to maybe door-to-door, house-to-house kind of cash transfer or conventional physical transfer to those people? If federal government is to do this to achieve this purpose, how do you think this can be done, given the peculiarity of the problems of these people or people living in this terrain?
Thank you. You are pushing me to agree with what I don't agree with in the first place. You know, our experience over the years, shows that these things do not work out well in Nigeria, and I have not seen any improvement. Either in terms of who are in government or new ideas or new ways they want to do it, that will make us achieve a different result. It is a case of doing the same thing and hoping to achieve a different result, which is called madness. And that is what is going on. Okay. Now, having said that, there is this video that is going on in the social media, where the federal government or the state government is trying to help victims, the flood victims in some parts of the country. We saw some people you can see some people in a boat like that, moving on top of the flood or water, if you like, and throwing bundles of naira currency to people who are in their houses. Maybe they're in story buildings. You see bundle, so they are throwing to them and all that. Some they throw into the water and people will be swimming to go and catch those bundles of naira and all that and all that. Are those the kind of things we are prescribing? Are those the kind of things we are talking about? Where is accountability? How much have they thrown and to whom? And all that. Who gets it? And at the end of the day, the government of that state or the federal government will be announcing how many billions, that have been spent and given to people like that. So I fought the whole process completely. And like I told you, my experience doesn't show me that anything has changed for government to continue to do what it is doing. Because when you talk about the data, for instance, it's not something that will be corrected over time. The mindset is already there. The mindset is already there.
Mr. Okeke, because of our time, please permit me to butt in here. Because of our time, let me give you a picture of what plays out when we need to conduct election. INEC officials are being sent to these villages to do physical registration. Don't you think it's also possible to deploy this strategy towards achieving these, where physical cash are being handed over to the villagers through the community leaders and the traditional rulers? Don't you think it's going to work?
Let me also tell you that it's not going to work. If I must tell you, I worked with one of the major oil companies at a point in my career, and I was part of media and community relations and all that. So what you're talking about, you have some, local chiefs and personalities like that, who cover these things, no matter how you try. And let me also tell you, the people you are saying like INEC, work like INEC people and go to village squares and all that, and people will line up and start getting them. They have a culture, they have system such that even if these people collect this money physically, by the time the so-called officials go, the situation that they will go back to the chiefs. If they don't go back to the chiefs, they have a way of punishing those people in those remote villages. I don't want to mention the locations to you, but that's been my experience. So the money coming from government is national cake, and the central figure that controls the national cake in those localities are the local chiefs and the youth or youth leaders and so on and so forth. So at the end of the day, these people will not get the actual amount being sent if they are going to get anything at all. Those communities have their kind of, in quote, government and governance structure, so that the individual is directly or deliberately or otherwise left, in their impoverished state. I'm sorry to say that, but that has been my experience. So I wish the government well that they will deploy people that are reliable and trustworthy, who may not have the intention of pocketing much of whatever cash. The attraction of cash once you're handling cash and giving to people. The attraction, but the intention will always be cannot be like abused by people handling cash. And if you want to transfer digitally, you have problem because these people in those remote villages may not, key into anything digital. They are still at the analog stage or state. That's the situation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcel Okeke, financial economist, for speaking to us this morning on the cash transfer embarked upon by the federal government as a way of making things easy for vulnerable citizens. But from all you said, it seemed like the government needs to put on its searchlight to monitor those that it has put in charge of this project. Thank you for your time again.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.
All right, Femi. So Marcel Okeke doesn't quite agree with the process involved in this conditional cash transfer initiative of the federal government, and he also believes that it's a way to encourage laziness. Now, there are also people who belong to that school of thought. Do you think it is justified, or are there other things the government could have done while there is cash transfer? Some skill acquisition could have been ongoing, some empowerment could have been ongoing, so you're not just giving the people fish, but you're also teaching them how to fish.
So going by that words of wisdom of that school of thought, that you don't give people fish, but you teach them how to do the act itself, I understand, and that's the angle Mr. Okeke is coming from. But we must understand that when it comes to riches or wealth, there are levels. Now, when you talk about cash transfer, to some people, it might not make any impact. I'm not saying this program is absolutely wrong, but what I'm saying is we can repurpose it in a way that it can still help some people. And I think the starting point should be the issue of data. For people in the cities, you're still struggling to even have data to drive the template in the city. Now you're talking about rural areas, that will create more problems. However, I think it is absolutely not a failure if we look for ways where peculiarities of people in the villages can be addressed. And one way I think this can be achieved is if we go through the community leaders. I made reference to an example. When we need to conduct elections, the federal government or the state government will send officials to those remote, no matter how remote these villages are, people are being sent there to collect data for election. They are being registered. In fact, some of these houses have numbers, they are being registered. So that can be a starting point towards reframing this template and towards achieving results. And how do you do that? I know for a big girl like you, 5,000, 10,000 might not make any impact.
It's not 5,000, 10,000.
No, I'm just saying as a reference.
In 3 payments.
I'm just saying as a reference now. Let's just say the minimum, let's just say 5,000 transfer has been done to a particular family. There are some people that would be the starting point. For Iya Basira, who lives in a remote village in Ibadan. Yeah, Chukudi, somewhere. That could be a starting point to go into what you call petty trading. You don't need shops for that. In front of her house, you can decide to start selling, this makeshift arrangement, and then she's going to start a business, a petty business, calling herself the CEO in her own right, to start that kind of business. So for people like that, it is not absolutely a loss. It's a starting point. What you do with your 5,000 and your 10,000 could also determine what the next level will be. If you get your 5,000, 10,000 and you decide to do petty trading, and I can give you an example. There's what we call going to.
Just
I know the question, what will you do with
yes, use the 25,000
let me give you a picture of what you can do with 5,000.
That would drive home.
You can start what you call sachet water business, what is generally called pure water. Pure water, is generally called pure water. That sachet kind of arrangement, you can start with maybe like few bags with 5,000 naira. Maybe the gain could be 50 naira, could be 100 naira, but it's a matter of time. You multiply, the multiplier effect will work out. So what it means is for the big boys or the people in the cities, 5,000 might not be enough to start, but for the people in the rural areas, I think their peculiarities should be addressed, and that can be done by involving the community leaders who know those people. They are leaders, they are responsible to them. If you say there's someone that lives in a particular street, they can tell the number of people who live there. They can even visit. And this is where the local government ought to come in as well. People can sit in Abuja and you know a remote area in somewhere in Mowe, Ogun State better than people who live in that area. So that's why you need community leaders, youth leaders, traditional leaders to come into this picture. They can be brought into the system whereby they are like the middlemen between the federal or the state government and the people in that community. When you need to hold your town hall meetings, these are people you use. They hold the town hall meetings. They even respect their kings more than even some of these governors and even the president, because these are people who are localized in that community. They see them every day, and that sense of belonging is there. So I don't think it's a loss totally. But what I think should be done is to involve the key stakeholders, the local stakeholder. It has to be localized, otherwise.
Sometimes why some initiatives of the federal government don't seem to have local impact is because there is no synergy between the federal government, the state, and the local government. You've mentioned the participation of the local government. If that was the case, I think that even getting the data of the target beneficiaries would have been much easier. Monitoring the process would be easier, because one fundamental thing that Marcel was able to highlight is the absence of the will to have this thing come through. So you have some community heads who might not be patriotic enough to see this process. They may even become obstacles to it. So, but if you have the local government involved, so it's a government thing, ensuring that you have officers who would monitor, and the local government chairmen themselves put their foot on the ground. I don't think that there is any local chief who would want to run against the local government chairman when they know that they are serious with this, because it's the lives of people that we're talking about here. In this time where some persons are even wondering when the next meal will come from, so 25,000 naira monthly would go a long way for many households. So if you have, let's say, in one street, about 10 houses or 10 households benefiting from that, it increases the purchasing power. So it means that they can go to the market and get basic food items. And that for the sellers too is a plus, because they may just be there from morning to evening. Very few persons come in to make purchase. But when this money come in, even if it's just for the first 1 or 2 weeks that they receive the money, it means that economic activity within that environment is being boosted, which is the target of the federal government, so that it is not just to give this people money. You're not going to eat the naira notes. You're going to use it to purchase something. So local economic activity is being spiked. It's been increased. But what I think that can be done, in addition to what you've recommended, using the way the IMF would go to register people and all of that, is to ensure that as they come out, they may have elderly ones among them. They may also have young people among them. You also identify those that can be trained for certain skills, so they do not become reliant, expecting that, oh, the next month another 25K will show, and then a month after people just do nothing. They can contribute in some way, and that's the way to make it sustainable, because after 3 months that the money stops coming, what happens? Should they be hungry? Do you now expect that, oh, since the money no longer comes, they should begin to look for how to make money by themselves? So I think as that money is paid to them, there should be empowerment to follow while the money keeps them for the 2-3 months process period that the empowerment continues, so that they have something to fall back on, and people don't just see like, oh, so the money that is gotten from the removal of fuel subsidy, you're giving to people. After 3 months, what happens? So it makes it of no effect at the end of the day.
I quite agree with you. And there's what we call hierarchy of needs, and the things that are rudimentary to people's survival, they are quite crucial, like food, shelter, and clothing. So these are things that can be taken care of. But my concern is, if these villages are like the go-to when we need to conduct election, now that it's leading to empowerment, we should also be able to get there.
It's the real. During election, you need them to get votes.
Yeah.
Cash transfer.
No,
necessary.
and another dimension to this is also, it can be a way to create jobs. Have young people who are like distribution officers stationed in that local government who will supervise this. You are creating jobs as well. Even the agberos too could be involved, to see what can be done to ensure that
Femi, I don't quite agree with you.
No, I'm just using that figuratively to see how we can
unemploy
young
in
people.
distributing money.
No, to help create a reach for those people. What I'm saying in essence, it might not be the Agbo in the right sense, but what I'm saying figuratively is to involve the unemployed young people. It can be a way to create jobs, whereby you turn them to distribution officers. They are the ones supervising this. They know those villages. They've been there. They live there, or perhaps grew up there.
I don't think that the government is in short of distribution officers. I just think that more monitoring
And
should
they
be done.
might need more, so it can also be a way to create more jobs locally.
When you're counting money, you're never running short of people to help count the money.
What I'm saying is, don't let us throw these ideas
No.
outright.
I think the
Like
IMF
what we
is
do on
right
this program,
in
it can be
asking
shaped.
that it's been expanded to rural
Yeah.
areas, because if you concentrate only on the urban areas, what about those in the rural areas? Because poverty would hit harder at the rural areas.
Poverty has no location. Food insecurity.
I think it will hit harder there.
Yeah.
Because
It's
the
eating
opportunities
everybody.
may be more in urban centers than in the rural areas.
All right, I quite agree with you. Let's see how it plays out.
Okay, so many thanks for watching today. In case you're wondering what's up with the blue, okay? Keep watching El Exchange. You might get to find out someday. That's if you didn't start the show with us, you would have known that, of course, blue is one of the colors of Sook News TV, and so we like to fly the colors sometimes. So let's do this again tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. If you've enjoyed the show, leave a comment. You can just give us a thumb up by liking, and also spreading the good news that the Isle 104.9 FM, the place where business meets bits, finally is here. You must have been hearing the sound already. You can also leave a comment, tell us where you've been listening from. That is to say, go on now, like our pages on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Sook News TV. I am Blessing Eichie. I'll see you tomorrow. Stay well.
All right, in case you missed any of our earlier conversations, you can get them. You can do a catch-up on all our social media platforms, our YouTube page. Just search for Sook News TV. There you find all the contents and all the conversations we've been having. It's the dawn of a new day. It's a new day, and so ensure that you hit your target for today. As we here will always get bigger and better. El Exchange returns tomorrow with another topic, with another guest. And don't forget, Market Insight comes up at 11. I am Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.